The day Cheryl Whitman lost everything. I never thought moving to Pinebrook Hollow would come with so much drama. On paper, it looked like the kind of quiet, charming neighborhood every suburban family dreams about. Tree-lined sidewalks, trimmed hedges, a community park with a duck pond. Even the name sounded peaceful. But I quickly learned that serenity has a price, and that price was one woman. Her name was Cheryl Whitman. She was the president of our homeowners association, or, as the neighborhood secretly called her when she wasn't within earshot Karen Supreme. From the moment we moved in, me, wife, my sister, our kids, and Cheryl made it her personal mission to monitor every inch of our property. My front lawn was too long one week and too short the next. My mailbox wasn't Pinebrook Crimson, it was Cherry Cabernet, and thus a violation of aesthetic harmony. Even the bird feeder my son hung from a tree in the backyard became an issue classified as an unauthorized wildlife attractant. I had to remove it within 48 hours or face a citation. Still, we tried to be cordial. We smiled at her when she passed by, even when her gaze lingered a little too long on our recycling bins. We waved at her husband, Tom, who always looked like he was one HOA meeting away from staging a jailbreak. We didn't want trouble. But absolutely nothing Calvi prepared us for what happened during the annual Pinebrook Hollow summer pool party. It was supposed to be a relaxed Saturday afternoon. The sun was warm, kids were laughing, and burgers were sizzling on the grill. My sister Kayla had brought her 10-year-old son, Micah, who has cerebral palsy. Micah doesn't speak, but he uses a specialized iPad with communication software that lets him interact with the world. It's his voice's way of saying what he feels, what he wants, what he loves. That day, Micah sat in the shade at a table near the pool, watching the kids play and chatting with my wife via his device. He wasn't in the water. He wasn't bothering anyone. I was at the grill flipping burgers when I heard Hat's shrill, unmistakable voice that made everyone in the neighborhood reflexively clench their jaw. "Excuse me. Electronic devices are strictly prohibited in the pool area," Cheryl barked, marching toward Micah with her clipboard clutched to her chest like it was the Constitution. I dropped my spatula immediately and started walking briskly around the pool. But I was on the other side. Kayla, always calm under pressure, stood up and placed a protective hand on her son's shoulder. "It's not just an iPad," she said evenly. "It's his communication device. Micah has cerebral palsy, needs this to speak." Cheryl's mouth tightened as she reached into her oversized leather tote and pulled out a laminated HOA handbook like it was a holy text. She carried it with her everywhere, as if she were a walking suburban gavel. "Rules are rules," she said with the kind of syrupy condescension that hides a dagger underneath. The signage clearly states, "No electronic devices within 20 feet of the pool." It's a safety hazard. I can't make exceptions. By then, I had made it over. "Cheryl," I said, trying my best to keep my tone level, "this is a medically necessary device. The Americans with Disabilities Act overrides HOA regulations. Micah needs it to communicate." She didn't blink. "Don't lecture me about the law, James. I've been president of this association for 7 years. I'm the rules." People had stopped chatting. Some of the kids had even paused mid-splash. I noticed a few neighbors discreetly pulling out their phones. This wasn't the first time Cheryl had made a scene, but something about this time felt different. It felt darker. "This isn't about your rule book," Kayla added, voice shaking. "This is about a little boy's right to communicate. The iPad stays." Then it happened, in what I can only describe as a moment of unhinged, power-drunk madness. Cheryl snatched the iPad from Micah's hands. "If you won't follow the rules," she declared, "then I'll enforce them myself." Micah let out a high-pitched whimper and reached out desperately for his iPod's lifeline. Kayla lunged forward, but Cheryl had already stepped back, holding it high above her head like a taunt. "You can have this back when you leave the pool area," she said flatly. "Give it back. Now." My voice came out deeper than I expected. The entire pool area was dead silent. And then, right there in front of at least a dozen families, with cell phones recording from every angle, Cheryl dropped the iPad on the concrete and stomped on it. The screen shattered with a sickening crack. There was a collective gasp. Children stared. Adults blinked in disbelief. Micah began to sob. My sister dropped to her knees, gathering him in her arms. And Cheryl? She just stood there, smug. Well, she said, dusting off her hands. Now we don't have an electronics problem, do we? My vision blurred with rage, but I knew better than to act on it. Instead, I took out my phone and called 911. I'm calling the police, I said loudly. You just destroyed a medical device for a disabled child. That's not just cruel, it's illegal. Cheryl's smugness vanished like mist in the sun. Her face drained of color. You can't call the police on me. I'm the HOA president. 911, what's your emergency? Yes, I'd like to report an incident of property destruction and potential hate crime against a disabled minor, I said into the phone, my eyes never leaving hers. We're at the Pinebrook Hollow community pool. A woman just deliberately destroyed a $3,000 communication device that belongs to a 10-year-old boy with cerebral palsy. Cheryl took a step back, clutching her rule book like a shield. That's ridiculous. It was a safety issue. I was just enforcing the rules. You weren't enforcing anything, Kayla shot back. You assaulted his ability to speak. The dispatcher remained calm. Sir, officers are en route. Please stay on the line. Cheryl turned to the crowd, desperate. You all know the rules. No electronics near the pool. I was doing my job. You've seen the handbook. But no one came to her aid. In fact, several neighbors moved to form a protective barrier around Mike and Kayla. I hope you know, Kayla added, eyes full of fury and tears, that device wasn't just a piece of tech. It was his voice. Do you understand what you just did? And just then, we all heard its sound of sirens. The police arrived within minutes. Two officers, Officer Martinez and Officer Green, entered the pool area with measured calm. What happened here? Officer Martinez asked. We have it on video, said Mrs. Lowry from across the street, holding out her phone. She destroyed that boy's iPad. Officer Martinez looked at the footage, then at Micah, then at Cheryl. Ma'am, she said, tone neutral but firm, I'm placing you under arrest for criminal destruction of property and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. You can't do this, Cheryl wailed as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. I'm the HOA president. HOA regulations do not override federal law, Officer Martinez replied. As she was let out, the entire community stood in stunned silence. And then, slowly, a ripple of applause spread through the crowd. 2 weeks later, Cheryl Whitman was charged with 3 criminal counts: destruction of medical property, violation of the ADA, and intimidation based on disability. She accepted a plea deal, a $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service at a center for disabled children, a restraining order preventing her from coming within 100 feet of Micah, and a court-mandated purchase of a brand-new, top-tier communication device for him paid for out of her own pocket. But that wasn't all. An emergency HOA board meeting was called. Residents gathered in the community center, where the board, after a unanimous vote, announced Cheryl's immediate removal as president. When the vote was read aloud, Cheryl, sitting in the back, no clipboard this time, whispered, "But I've been president for 7 years. This association needs me." No one said a word, and as she slowly packed her things, shoulders slumped and face pale, it became clear to everyone watching. Her reign was over, and peace finally returned to Pinebrook Hollow. What came after the fall? In the weeks that followed Cheryl Whitman's very public downfall, Pinebrook Hollow felt like a different place. The air seemed lighter. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact at mailbox pickups now smiled at each other. Kids rode their bikes down sidewalks without being glared at for unregistered wheels. Even the community bulletin board, once dominated by color-coded warnings and passive-aggressive notices, now displayed flyers for block parties, bake sales, and a fundraiser for Micah's school. But healing, as always, is more than just policy changes. It's people, and stories, and accountability. Micah's new device arrived 3 days after Cheryl's sentencing. It was top of the line, loaded with upgrades, customized apps, and a bright blue case with a reinforced shock shell. When the delivery driver dropped it off at her front door, Kayla stood holding the box like it was a sacred object. She didn't say much, but the tears on her cheeks said everything. Micah tapped on the screen slowly, carefully. "Hi, Mommy," the voice said in a gentle robotic tone. He smiled. Then he tapped again. "I love you." Kayla burst into tears. It wasn't just a new device. It was a restoration. Not just a property, but a voice. Of dignity. Of presence. That following weekend, our neighborhood hosted a community rebuild barbecue. It wasn't an official HOA event, no clipboards, no laminated rules. Just people, real people, grilling ribs, laughing, kids playing tag, lawn chairs circling the pool. In the middle of it all, Micah. He was surrounded by a group of neighborhood kids, one of whom, Emily, from 2 houses down, was fascinated by how he used the iPad. "So wait," she asked, curious. "You can make it say anything." Micah nodded and tapped a few buttons. "Emily is cool." She lit up. "Micah, you're awesome." That day was the first time I'd seen him interact so freely, without stares, without whispered questions, without fear. Just a boy. In a neighborhood. Being included. That was the goal all along. But not everyone moved on so easily. The unraveling of Cheryl Whitman. Despite the plea deal and the community service, Cheryl couldn't seem to grasp what had happened to her. In her mind, she was still the misunderstood protector of order. Still the woman who held it all together. Still the president, in spirit if not in title. She appealed her removal. Twice. Both were denied. She tried to circulate a petition to restore neighborhood integrity. Only 3 people signed it, and one of them was her husband, Tom, who looked deeply embarrassed about it. Within a month, Cheryl stopped attending public events altogether. She withdrew from view, blinds drawn, her infamous clipboard nowhere to be seen. And yet, somehow, that wasn't the end of her story. Because justice has a funny way of continuing echoing long after the gavel drops. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I got a knock on the door. It was Officer Martinez in plain clothes. "I'm not here officially," she said gently, "but I thought you should know Cheryl is being investigated for a pattern of discriminatory complaints going back 6 years." My eyebrows raised. "She's filed over 300 violations," Martinez explained. And an overwhelming number of them were against families of color, families with children with disabilities, or single mothers. I swallowed hard. She went after people she thought wouldn't fight back, Martinez continued. But now that one family did, others are coming forward. The investigation led to a class action civil suit. 5 families, 3 Black, 1 Hispanic, 1 with a child on the autism spectrum, filed a joint claim against the Pine Brook Hollow HOA, naming Cheryl as the primary instigator of targeted harassment. It wasn't long before a local news station ran a feature titled HOA or Harassment, inside the whisper campaign of Pine Brook Hollow. They interviewed Kayla. They interviewed Micah. They even aired the poolside footage that had gone viral among residents. Suddenly, Cheryl wasn't just a disgraced HOA president. She was a cautionary tale. 1 month later, Cheryl and Tom quietly sold their home and moved out of Pine Brook Hollow. The for sale sign didn't last long. People were eager to buy in a neighborhood that had been scrubbed clean of her legacy. The morning she left, Kayla and I stood at the edge of our driveway. We didn't wave. We didn't speak. But we watched. And when the moving van turned the corner and disappeared, we both exhaled as if we hadn't realized we'd been holding our breath for 3 months. The rise of something better. With Cheryl gone, the community didn't dissolve. It flourished. A new HOA president was elected, Marcia Bell, a retired school principal with a reputation for fairness and warmth. She immediately revised the HOA bylaws to include a disability inclusion clause, citing Micah's case directly. A subcommittee was formed to oversee ethical enforcement of community standards. Even better, Micah was named honorary co-chair of the committee. He attended his first meeting wearing a blue bow tie, his iPad in his lap, his name on a placard that read, "Micah Johnson, Community Advisor, Voice Matters." They gave him the floor, and when he tapped, "Let kids be kids," everyone applauded. What Cheryl tried to suppress had now become the core of who we were, a neighborhood that listened. Not to rule books, but to each other. Not to laminated threats, but to voices that had been ignored too long. That summer, Pinebrook Hollow changed for good. Not because of laws, not because of handbooks, but because enough people stood up and said, "This isn't right." Because one boy refused to be silent. Because a sister defended her son like a lion. Because a crowd chose to film instead of look away. Because the law, at its best, isn't just about punishing bad actors, but amplifying the people they tried to erase. Final reflections. People sometimes ask me if I regret moving to Pinebrook Hollow. I don't. Not for a second. Because the truth is, neighborhoods aren't defined by gates or gardens or the length of your lawn. They're defined by what we tolerate and what we refuse to. We refused silence. We refused cruelty masked as rules. We refused to let a little boy's voice be stomped into concrete. And in that refusal, we found something stronger than any HOA charter could ever contain. Community, compassion, and the courage to say, never again.